Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. Case file number 601, written by Fropcake, Walking Out of Control. Last night I couldn't fall asleep and was awake for hours. Somehow, I started thinking about my childhood and old memories that I had nearly forgotten, and then I couldn't stop. I was reviewing my entire life in chronological sequence, like a quick flip through the major scenes of a movie. And when I reached the end, there was this gradually increasing feeling of dread, and the thought, I'm going to die soon, kept playing in my head. I had images of me killing myself in different ways and everything, but I didn't want to die. It kept getting stronger and stronger, and then I couldn't help but get the intense feeling that it would be my last day alive. I don't know how to explain it, but it felt like the thoughts were not really mine, or maybe I wasn't me. I got really restless and I needed to get up and go somewhere, anywhere, so I put on a windbreaker and shoes and went outside. I didn't even put on the socks or take my phone. It felt like I had to leave immediately. There was no time. This was happening at 2:42 a.m. when I left my dorm. I walked outside and I couldn't stop crying. It felt like my body wasn't mine anymore, like I couldn't control my legs anymore. They seemed to move on their own, like they were tugging me somewhere. I wanted to know what it was and get rid of this feeling, so I let it take me where it wanted and just followed wherever my feet took me. It doesn't sound real even now, but I truly felt like I was only partially in control of myself. I did not feel like myself at all. I walked through an empty neighborhood where everything felt strange. The orange cast from the streetlights, the garden statues, the twisted trees that looked like they could easily turn into something else at any second. I remember just hearing the sound of my own shaking breath and my footsteps. When I first started walking, I thought that I might turn up in the empty field by the woods where I usually like to sit in the daytime, but then I ended up walking past it and down the road. I started to freak out when I realized that just up the road was a cemetery, and I got really scared that I was about to die. I kept crying and shaking, but I couldn't stop. Strangely, I went past it and turned the corner. I remember passing by the stone wall and the almost tugging sensation as if my body wanted to go in there. I kept going up this little slope that I thought was supposed to cut through the other campus buildings. It was dark and hard to see clearly. But then I saw gravestones to my left and found that I was at the entrance to another part of the cemetery. I didn't even know that there was another section right there. It was leading me inside. If I had kept going, I would have been at the center of the field in front of the graves. I got really freaked out, and I ran back to my dorm, overcoming whatever this was. I'm fairly certain that for a brief moment on the way back, I heard footsteps running right behind me, but there wasn't anyone there. When I got back, it was 3:28 a.m. Also, I don't know if this is related or means anything, but the day before, I crossed paths with a vulture, and a few days earlier, I seemed to be seeing a lot of crows. I've never really believed in spooky stuff, but it was such a surreal and terrifying experience. I thought about it and wondered if it was maybe a panic attack. I've never had one before, so I don't know. I am also depressed, so maybe my brain is just doing weird things. Does anyone else think that this seems strange, or does it sound like I'm just paranoid? I'm not sure if I'm just thinking too much into it and making a big deal out of nothing, but it felt so weird. Case notes, file number 601. I'm sorry to hear about your depression. The world is so heavy these days, untold burdens and, moreover, uncertainty in our lives. Could this have been a manifestation of your insecurities, an internal cry materializing from your subconscious, hijacking your body, almost like a conscious sleepwalking incident? Perhaps. That said, the feelings you mentioned prior to this happening, of great dread, an itch, it sounds how I'd imagine being possessed, or at least in the presence of some external willed force would feel like. The grave you were compelled to visit? I wonder whose grave it was. Maybe someone had recently died and just wanted to be remembered, or at least their echo and imprint did. No one wants to fall into that pit of oblivion, forgotten forever. Bonus file, written by Anonymous. Even the dead can smile. So, this happened a few years ago. But first, a bit about my uncle, Paulino. He was an alcoholic, died of cancer, and was battling with alcoholism his whole life. He started drinking in his teens, and this kept going and turned into an addiction. My cousin's life was pretty hard, as my uncle neglected him through his infancy, and money was an issue. My uncle developed throat cancer in his 40s and had to quit drinking to have a chance. He actually managed to stop drinking and smoking and fought the hell out of the cancer. He then went 20 years without drinking or smoking until he developed a new form of cancer, and this time he didn't have the strength to fight the addiction and died drinking and smoking. He was a loving man, funny and really helpful, but he was stigmatized within the family because of his addiction. I was living with him and my grandmother at the time, as I was attending college in the city where they lived. My uncle used to help her as she can't walk, but he wasn't doing much since the disease came back, and I picked up on taking care of her, alongside one of my aunts. I tried to be supportive for him, but I know how hard it was for him to deal with the addiction and the cancer, again. I really cared for him, and the worst part was feeling everyone else draw away from him as he was slowly dying. At the funeral, he was in the coffin in the middle of the room, and we were all around him. When the time came, people started talking about him, and I couldn't keep my eyes off him. He had a neutral look, but you could distinguish sadness in his face, especially around his mouth. Everyone that spoke said good things about him, but they all mentioned his diseases or the addiction, or how it was hard dealing with that, the sadness of watching him go back to it, etc. I wanted to say only good things about him, but I had no strength. But after my cousin spoke, his wife started talking and only said fun things about him. The times he helped her and how he was like a father she never had, and some funny situations. It was the only time that I took my eyes off of him because the speech was so moving and because it was really representative of his good nature, what I wanted to say but didn't manage to. Then, when I looked back at him, he had a distinct smile on his face. He seemed genuinely happy at her words and how everybody was laughing and remembering him in a good light, not throwing any criticism or paying attention to his flaws. It really amused me, and I'm a big non-believer of life after death, but that is something I really can't explain. I wish I could say it was only my perception because of the moment, but I genuinely saw a smile on his face that then faded away a few moments later. Bonus file, written by 6 Feet Below. That's my voice coming from the woods. During a school break, me and my mom and one of my older brothers went to visit our uncle and his ranch in Nevada. I have trouble sleeping, so one night I decided to take a walk around the perimeter of the ranch, just for some air. I made it all the way to the other side of the ranch, to the far end of the pastures. From the last fence to a woodsy hill area is about 50 yards. I decided to stay and look up in the grassy area to look at the stars. What no one has told this city girl was that with no trees and no lights, save for the barn on the other side of the ranch, you can see so many freaking stars. It was breathtaking to see the universe like that. Light pollution robs us of some amazing views. I started whistling. I heard a branch crack, so I stopped, a little startled. Then something else started to whistle right at me. I froze, and it seemed like every hair on my body stood straight up. I couldn't move, and the whistling got louder and closer. It was the almost exact same nonsense melody I was whistling not 15 seconds ago. I know what you're thinking, but OP, birds are a thing. Bull freaking crap. I know the difference between a bird and whatever the hell that was. And this ain't even over yet, so buckle up. I, the stupid white girl in a horror movie, decided to say, hello? Something said, hello, right back to me in my own voice. And yes, I know what my voice sounds like. Slightly raspy, faint Bronx accent. Usually lower pitched unless I'm excited or mad. Then it's usually so high pitched, my friends say I sound like Harley Quinn on Adderall. Another branch snapped, and that was my cue to freaking book it back down around the paddocks, back to the barn and the main house, which was about 2 acres. It was like a blur. I have knee issues from a car crash, but I didn't even feel an ache as I sprinted all the way back to the main house. I still don't know what it was, I didn't tell anyone else about it, despite my mom being extremely superstitious. I did a little bit of frantic Googling the day after, and the closest thing I could come up with was a skinwalker. Can anyone help? I'm still freaked, and it happened in February of this year.